Newcastle United are back in Premier League action and they can take a huge leap towards Champions League qualification against Ipswich this weekend. Eddie Howe will be back on the touchline, thankfully, and there's plenty of transfer rumours to talk about in today's video, as well as your questions. Let's get into it. Hello and welcome back to my YouTube channel, welcome back to another video. Before we start, as always, please like, share and subscribe if you haven't already. I was looking at the average viewership of each video across the last season to over the summer to now, and I'm really happy with the growth. I know I can get much better with things like lighting, and I have some big plans for the channel. If you haven't already, subscribe and also like all the videos because it really does help push them with the algorithm, and it is never ever taken for granted, so thanks so much for that. We'll get straight into the video today. I got some of your questions about team selection, which I'll get to at the end, but it's a huge game on Saturday at St James's Park against Ipswich Town. I'll be at the game, so I'll bring you a video from pitchside afterwards, but a real opportunity for Newcastle to get back on track after a terrible weekend in terms of results and performance at Aston Villa. The 4-1 defeat, I did a video immediately after, and I haven't really changed my opinion after that game. I think Newcastle had bought themselves that ability to have that bad day against Crystal Palace with that win and the fact that they've won all those games. And I think the key thing that I take away from the Villa game against the other games is Newcastle did what they had to do against Brentford, Leicester, Manchester United and Crystal Palace. They really were expected to win those games. They were seen as difficult if they didn't turn up, but really they were favourites. They were expected to win. I don't think you could really say that about Aston Villa, because history says, as I said in the video, that generally the home team wins fairly comfortably because those games are sort of decided by whoever gets their momentum first, and often it's the home team. But Villa scored in the first minute, and it really did go wrong in the second half and made it look a lot worse than it was. But they'd got themselves into that great position, Newcastle, by winning the games against Palace, Leicester and Man United and Brentford. And I think this is another one in that ilk. They can relegate Ipswich with a victory on Saturday, which is not really part of anyone's thinking. But Newcastle need to turn up and do a professional job and win comfortably to take advantage of the fact that Villa then went to Manchester City and lost in the last minute, which is quite demoralising. And a victory in this game does kind of reset things. They would go 5 points clear again, 4 games to go, and I think that would be really, really big. Man City, Villa and Forest are all in FA Cup action as well, so there's a chance to put some distance between Newcastle and those clubs, get back ahead of them all with a win in this game. Newcastle probably need 9 points to secure a top 5 finish from here. They're on 59. I think 68 would probably do it. They need to win this game. If they don't win this game, I think that's when the real crisis talk will return. I think lots of people were slightly overreacted against Villa because of the manner of the result, and you can understand it to a certain degree, but ultimately they were still very much in control. It was a defeat that they could afford. It wasn't welcome. At least they knew that they could bounce back from this game. Eddie Howe being back in the dugout is great news. He'll be taking training over the next couple of days as well, getting back into the swing of things. Some people are talking about a chance to regain the lost goals on goal difference. For me, I think that's got to be a secondary thing. If you offered a 1-0 victory now, I think lots of people would rightfully take it because it's about getting the points on the board. It doesn't really matter how it's done at the moment. It's just about winning the games, getting through this point in the season, getting into the Champions League, to have much more momentum going into the summer, both in terms of keeping the likes of Alexander Isak, which is obviously going to be the main talking point of the summer transfer window, but also then knowing who you can buy, knowing how much money you can spend on the squad, which is going to be rebuilt a little bit this summer. I think Ipswich is on paper a very winnable game, very easy game, because they're one of those 3 cut adrift at the bottom, but you've got to be wary. They've drawn at Villa, they've drawn at Forest, they've drawn at Chelsea, beaten Spurs. Now Spurs have had a really poor season this year, but they've gone and imposed themselves on some difficult away trips, and they'll not be lying down for this game. They'll want to prolong their status as best as possible. We'll see. We'll see if Liam Delap starts up front. He's been apparently nursing a rib injury, but there's been very little actual information on it. It's sort of innocuous, and Kieran McKenna, the manager, has not been very happy to talk about it, which is quite strange when you think about it. Obviously, there's lots of speculation over his future. He's been linked with Newcastle, but linked with a number of other clubs, and he's got a release clause of about £30 million in his contract if and when Ipswich are relegated. So he's all but certain to leave Portman Road this season. But he's shown that he's a massive threat, and if he starts and he puts himself about, he can cause a lot of issues for Newcastle. And I think if Newcastle aren't at it again, they could come unstuck. And one of those dangerous games where lots of people just assume Newcastle should win. I heard Gary Neville and Jamie Carragher on the overlap saying it's a home banker, it's a definite win. Newcastle have been bitten by this whole thing of not being professional enough, assuming they'll win the game. The crowd's got to be up for it. It's another crucial game on the road to qualifying for the Champions League. It's got to have that feel of it in the air. I think it's very easy to assume that they'll just beat Ipswich just because of the difference in quality. But as I say, Ipswich have gone and imposed themselves and done fairly well away from home against some decent sides. They've not won many games, but they've drawn quite a few. And of the three promoted clubs, they've been the ones who looked like they can compete a bit more. Obviously, there are games against Man City at home, Newcastle at home in December, Arsenal at the weekend, where maybe there was a huge gulf in class. But Newcastle have got to make that pay. They've got to start fast. They've got to go for it. They've got to really impose themselves. They've got to get this game won. And the only way they can do that is with professional performance. There are a couple of questions that you guys have asked me about starting 11, so I'll leave that till the end. But yeah, this is a huge, huge game for Newcastle to win, and I think that they will just about do that. But we'll move on to a transfer link that's been doing the rounds this week. Strasbourg striker Emanuel Emegha does feel like very much the right type of player for Newcastle, the right type of player for Paul Mitchell in the right market. He'll be looking at European markets. Emegha is a Dutch youth international, 6'5", 13 goals in 25 games this season. Very much of the Isak type striker, where he's very good on the shoulder, very sort of strong, powerful, skillful, very much the same sort of raw skill set as Isak, and very much the same sort of profile as Will Asula. The type of player that Newcastle want in that front line does really feel like that. I do think that this one might have legs. He's, as I say, plays for Strasbourg, who are owned by Todd Bowley, and Blue Co obviously own Chelsea, so there's a link there. So if Chelsea kind of come along and want to sign him, they'll have obviously a big advantage, and they have been linked, but I think they've been linked with pretty much every Strasbourg player this season. He wouldn't be demanding, or wouldn't be in a position to demand first team football in a way that somebody like Liam Delap has said. He's been linked with Newcastle. He's probably wanting to come into a team and have a chance of starting. I think at Newcastle it's a slightly different scenario, because everybody who comes in knows they're going to be second fiddle to Alexander Isak, but he's a player that is raw, isn't quite ready for that step up to start games, but has got pedigree. 1 in 2 pretty much for Strasbourg this season. They're chasing Champions League under Liam Rosenior. So this is a really interesting signing. He'd be a very, very good player for Newcastle to sign. Obviously, I've made clear that I think Jonathan David would be the ideal signing for a striker this summer on a free transfer once his contract at Lille expires. But the fact that most clubs in Europe, because he's free and because of the situation that he's in, and how proven he is at the top level, I think Newcastle might find it difficult they'll certainly face competition to sign David. So Emegha will be a really, really interesting signing for Newcastle, because he suits the profile in terms of the signings that Paul Mitchell wants to make, but he suits the playing style that Eddie Howe wants of his strikers. He wants tall, powerful, but dynamic, pacey and skillful players with good finishing ability and good goal scoring records. This is what Emegha is, and I think he's definitely mouldable for Newcastle going forward. So I really wouldn't be surprised if Emanuel Emegha is on their list for the summer, and we'll see how that pans out. Just before we end, I've got a couple of questions on team selection from you guys. Obviously, Newcastle have kept the same team for the last 7 games, and that was seen as one of the reasons why they were beaten by Villa, who were able to use their superior squad depth and bring a lot of quality off the bench. Newcastle couldn't do that. They also couldn't really make too many changes from the start. Sean has asked, is Anthony Gordon replacing Murphy on the right a genuine option? He then says, I know Murphy's been good, but Gordon is one of our best players, and I feel he's raring to go to prove a point. I think this one could be interesting. This is where the only change I think is most likely to happen will come from. I think Newcastle do need to refresh. There is another question from Juan, who says, would it be the same team again, 7 days rest? He thinks it probably will be, and I fully understand that as well. But I do think if there is a change to come in this game, it's most likely to bring Anthony Gordon in, either for Barnes or for Murphy. Barnes has been really good on the left. Actually, they did a video on Gordon playing on the right after the Arsenal game and said that I thought that was a problem solved on the right-hand side. Gordon had done really well. There's a slight difference between the point I was making then and the point I'm making now, given that Lewis Hall is out, Tino Livramento is currently playing on the left-hand side. So the benefit of Gordon playing on the right against Arsenal was he would stretch the pitch and hug the touchline, allowing Livramento to underlap, which is not something that Kieran Trippier does. So maybe that might be a bit of a consideration for Eddie Howe. But generally speaking, I think if Anthony Gordon's going to come back in now, I do agree with Sean that he has a point to prove and he will be raring to go. He's got a big part to play between now and the end of the season, hopefully helping Newcastle get into the Champions League spots. Let's see whether Gordon comes in. But I do think that will be the only change. Obviously, Joe Willock is in there as well after his concussion protocol. He came back against Crystal Palace, but hasn't really pulled up too many trees, isn't likely to usurp one of those midfielders. I think the only real debate, if everyone's fit, is whether Gordon comes in for Murphy. And actually, I would tend to side with Juan on this. I think that 7 days rest, it'll be the same team again from the start. It's must win for Newcastle, but I think they'll do the job as well. I'll be back on Saturday from St James's Park with my reaction video. Like, share and subscribe. Thanks so much for joining me. I'll see you then. Cheers.